16th century France was torn apart by the French Wars of Religion, 1562 to 1598, a brutal struggle between Catholic royal power and Protestant Huguenots that turned politics into literal blood sport. King Charles IX, technically monarch since 1560, but effectively controlled by his mother Catherine de' Medici, presided over a court where rival noble houses, most famously the ultra-Catholic House of Guise and the Protestant Bourbons, jockeyed for influence and survival. The Massacre of Vassy, March 1, 1562, when the Duke of Guise's men slaughtered worshippers and ignited the First War, left wounds that ran deep and fed a cycle of revenge. By 1572, Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, a seasoned naval commander and leading Huguenot statesman, had grown unusually influential at court and was pressing for a Protestant alliance and concessions. His rise alarmed many Catholic factions. The royal wedding on August 18, 1572, between Henry of Navarre, Henri de Bourbon, the Protestant heir presumptive, and Margaret of Valois, sister of Charles IX, was arranged by Catherine and others as a frail political détente, a calculated attempt to bind the Bourbons to the Valois and halt the recent carnage. The plan was precarious. Thousands of Huguenot nobles and gentlemen flooded Paris for the celebrations, packing the cramped, fetid streets and staying in houses across the city, which left a volatile concentration of armed Protestants under watchful Catholic eyes. Paris in late August 1572 felt claustrophobic. Sallow alleys, watchful guards, whispered plots, and a grim sense that something terrible could explode and tear the kingdom apart. On August 22, 1572, in Paris, Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, the leading Huguenot statesman, was struck down by an assassin's arquebus ball and left bleeding and gravely wounded. That violent blow shattered whatever fragile calm the royal wedding had bought. Coligny's influence at court, his push for French intervention against Philip II in the Netherlands, and his closeness to King Charles IX had made him a lightning rod, so his shooting was immediately read as an attack on the entire Huguenot presence assembled for the August 18th marriage of Henry of Navarre to Margaret of Valois. Word of the shot raced through the city's fetid alleys and gilded halls. Huguenot gentlemen crowded the Admiral's bedside on Rue Saint-Antoine and Rue de Béthissy, while doctors and ministers tended a gory wound and rumors swelled into outrage. Henry of Navarre and other Protestant nobles demanded justice and threatened swift retaliation if Coligny died. The rumor mill darkened. Some suspected the ultra-Catholic House of Guise. Others whispered of a broader Catholic plot to remove Huguenot influence altogether. At court, the air curdled into faction. The Duke of Guise and hardline Catholic councillors urged preemption, arguing that a decisive strike would prevent a Huguenot coup and avenge the insult. Catherine de' Medici and a circle of moderates counseled caution, worried that a massacre in Paris would shatter royal legitimacy and spark nationwide war. King Charles IX, young and terrified, oscillated between rage and panic, convening urgent councils as the palace hummed with secret messages and alarm. Fear bred rumor. Rumor bred demands for vengeance, and both camps hardened their lists of enemies. In the cramped capital, with thousands of armed Protestants billeted across the city and a royal household split between terror and appetite for blood, decision-making grew dangerous, impulsive, conspiratorial, and driven by the combustible mix of revenge and dread that pushed the court toward a brutal, irreversible resolution. In the cramped, sweat-slick rooms of the Louvre on the tense nights of August 23rd and 24th, 1572, Catherine de' Medici gathered a series of private councils where fear and ambition braided into deadly policy. King Charles IX, pale and indecisive, sat beside her as hardline councillors and the Duke of Guise pressed a brutal option: eliminate the Huguenot leadership wholesale to stop an alleged coup and to avenge the shooting of Admiral Gaspard de Coligny on August 22nd in Rue du Faubourg Saint-Antoine. Voices in those meetings were sharp as knives. Some, including Guise allies and zealous Catholic captains, urged an immediate public strike to decapitate the Huguenot command in Paris. Others, worried about legal fallout and the royal reputation, insisted on plausible deniability and a cover story of self-defense. Catherine and a few moderates tried to craft a face-saving cover, framing any action as foiling a Protestant uprising rather than sanctioning slaughter. Advisors debated wording carefully so orders could read like arrests while allowing execution in practice. That calculated ambiguity mattered. A vague royal command to the Swiss Guard and the royal bodyguard, and cryptic signals to Parisian militias let opportunistic captains interpret preventive measures as license for blood. Night couriers carried half-phrases through fetid streets. Guildmasters, arquebusiers, and Catholic confraternities, already seething from months of provocations and the memory of Vassy, did not hear restraint. They smelled permission. Local officials and captains of the watch, hungry for favor or vengeance, mobilized bands of urban workers and retainers. Rumors of a royal mandate turned simmering hatred into readiness for butchery. As the palace debates hardened into a tacit plan, the machinery of violence clicked into place. Armed men waited in alleys, swords sharpened, preachers and priests stoking fury in parish churches. By dawn on August 24th, the line between elite plotting and mob slaughter had been erased, leaving only the terrible question of who would make the first murderous move. On the night of August 23rd to 24th, 1572, Paris convulsed as whispers turned into slaughter. Under a hot, merciless sky, parties of arquebusiers, royal guards, and paid cutthroats surrounded Huguenot lodgings where Admiral Gaspard de Coligny and other Protestant leaders slept under watchful eyes. Orders filtered down from the Louvre and from frightened, vengeful counselors to strike before the Protestants could organize. At a single knock, doors were forced, candles smothered, and knives found throats. Coligny was dragged from his bed, stabbed and bludgeoned. His blood slicked the floor, and his body was later hurled into the street and attacked by a mob. What began as targeted executions doubled, then fractured into chaotic slaughter as killers spilled into alleys and courtyards, chasing refugees and guests. Swords flashed in lamplight, strangled screams answered by the rattle of arquebuses, and the air filled with the metallic stench of fresh blood. Civic authority evaporated. Some city officials were bewildered. Others tacitly consented, while some hid in fear. Parish priests either preached obedience or fanned fanaticism from their pulpits, turning congregations into hunting packs. Butchers and guildsmen answered the call with knives and cleavers. Militia captains led mobs through tenements where Protestant families huddled, and neighbors with old grievances joined in with hammers and axes. The violence leapt from mansion to tenement, from street to bridge, each murder breeding another. Even those who sought royal shelter were not safe once the mobs gained momentum. By dawn, the city was a torn canvas of gore and ruin. Shutters nailed across blood-stained doors and cartloads of corpses clogging narrow streets. The night's orgy of violence obliterated any legal pretense of arrest and turned a court-sanctioned purge into a general massacre that poised Paris on the brink of a kingdom-wide catastrophe. This is the scene that became known as the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. On St. Bartholomew's Day, August 24, 1572, the violence that had begun as targeted killings in the Louvre exploded into a slaughter that consumed Paris. From dawn, violence spread like a contagion. Priests' sermons steeled congregations. Militia captains led hunts through the Marais and the Ile de la Cite, and artisan gangs and retainers hacked and shot Huguenot nobles and even women and children in their lodgings. Alleys filled with the ragged stench of blood and the metallic tang of fresh gore. Contemporary witnesses described cartloads of corpses and bodies heaped at bridges and quays, nobles disemboweled, servants throttled, and once gilded streets slick with entrails and brains. Contemporary and modern estimates place Paris deaths in the low thousands, often cited around 2,000 to 4,000, while the nationwide toll in the weeks that followed swelled into the thousands more. The slaughter radiated outward. In the following weeks, cities such as Lyon, Bordeaux, and Rouen and scores of provincial towns experienced spasms of killings, arrests, and summary executions as local magistrates and mobs emulated Paris. The Valois monarchy, King Charles IX, Catherine de' Medici, and their counselors emerged smeared with culpability as royal orders, ambiguous or explicit, ignited the purge. The massacre was an irreversible turning point. Hopes for a peaceful settlement collapsed, and France plunged into a protracted, merciless, sectarian war. The gory carnage of August 24, 1572, in Paris provoked an immediate uproar. Protestant courts in London and the Dutch Republic denounced the killings, while Pope Gregory XIII hailed the purge as a triumph. For Huguenots, the slaughter Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, among the most famous victims, became a grim martyr narrative, spread through sermons and pamphlets that hardened collective memory. Politically, it did the opposite of reconciliation. Both sides radicalized, cycles of revenge intensified, and the Valois monarchy's moral authority collapsed. Charles IX died in 1574, and the Valois line ended when Henry III was assassinated in 1589. The massacre ultimately forced uneasy compromises. Henry of Navarre converted to Catholicism in 1593 to claim the throne, and the Edict of Nantes in 1598 granted limited toleration rather than true concord. St. Bartholomew's Day became Europe's dark emblem of religious massacre, a stark reminder of the limits of engineered reconciliation and the lasting poison of sectarian violence.